right, welcome back to the Backcountry Manifesto podcast, brought to you by the fine folks at Sharedport. I'm your buddy out west, Hayden Samac, and today on the show we have, well, I don't know when this is going to come out, but previously we had a very good friend of mine, Dr. Hayden Beers, on the show. He talked all about the wolves of Yellowstone, his work with the bears in Katmai, all sorts of good stuff. If you haven't seen that episode, that's episode 18. You can go check that out right now. Today on the show, we have Hayden's partner, Dr. Kristin I always screw your last name up.
Engebretsen.
Engebretsen.
Yeah, it's easy.
I always screw your name up except for that one time, bro. She's talking all about, we're going to talk about mountain lions. I don't really need to convince you guys out in listener or viewer land why mountain lions are cool. But I'll tell you what, Kristin is going to, without trying, convince you that she and her work are very cool as well. You worked at, or you currently are stationed, is that like the thing? Posted, doing research out of the Rocky Mountain Research Station.
Yeah.
And you're studying mesocarnivores.
Yep.
Real quick, mesocarnivores.
So middle-sized carnivores. So we're not doing like wolves and cougars. Right now I'm working on lynx, fisher, marten, wolverine, and montane red fox.
Okay.
It's like high elevation red fox. Sierra Nevada red fox is like the focal species.
Sweet. Previous to this, almost all of your work was centered for a number of years on mountain lions.
Yep.
How did you get into mountain? I mean, other than them just being cooler than hell, yeah. How'd you get into mountain lions? Why mountain lions? What? I assume that a lot of people want to work with mountain lions. How'd you get involved in that?
So I did a lot of different tech jobs and research when I was coming out of undergrad to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And my PhD was the Mountain Lion Project. That was the first time I'd ever actually worked on a carnivore focused project. So I did a lot of like ungulate stuff first. And I liked the predator-prey aspect. I was studying a lot of like deer mortality, and I thought, oh, this is cool, but like I want to see the other side of it. I want to think about the animals that are eating instead of being eaten. And I knew I wanted to come out west. I was back east for most of my undergrad, most of my research technician jobs, and my master's. And I grew up in Florida, so we have the Florida panther, which is the same thing as a mountain lion, just a swamp lion. And I always thought they were really cool. And I was like, well, if I want to work out west and I want to work on large carnivores, like the mountain lion is the coolest thing. No offense to the wolf people. Wolves are also very cool, but like mountain lions are arguably cooler.
I think so.
I'm biased, but they're so like elusive and secretive and just like, I don't know. They fascinate me in a way that wolves don't.
I think for me, what it is I see a lot of wolf-sized, wolfish animals all day, every day. I see like a lot of bigger dogs.
Big dogs, yeah.
I never ever see cats of that size.
I mean, part of the thing that drew me to them when I was like learning about the different species that we had in North America is just that they came back from such a hard hit after all the bountying and everything. So successfully and kind of discreetly. Like you don't know when mountain lions are in your backyard, but you know when there's wolves because they're howling. They're a bit more like visible. Yeah. And mountain lions are just so good. They're so adaptable, so good at like recolonizing areas and fitting into like whatever matrix of landscape is left after our development and everything. And they're beautiful. They're cool. I would love to work with like other big cats, but this is the one we have in North America, and they're just awesome.
And their distribution is like way more accessible than I feel like wolf distribution, right? Like there are pockets of them in the Great Lakes. Now there's some in Colorado and, you know, out in like Oregon and Washington and obviously Montana, Wyoming, Idaho.
Texas. I mean, there's cats everywhere.
Oh, no. I mean, I was talking about the wolves. But like, yeah, but cats everywhere.
I mean, they're not like in the Southeast except for Florida, but they're getting back there. Like, and there's every once in a while a cat makes it to Georgia from Florida. There were those, really, like that high profile case of the one cat moving, I think from South Dakota
Black
to
Hills,
New England. Yeah. And having like just sneaking through cities and communities and just making it all the way. And it's like, oh, wow, no one knew this was happening. But they're recolonizing. They're definitely pushing east, which is so cool because they would have been there originally until we messed it up.
Los Angeles.
Yeah. Oh, and the fact that there's cat populations like in the city limits, just like living in these wild spaces is really cool. I mean, it obviously creates like a conservation issue because you don't have room to disperse, but it's so cool to see that they can do that and they can adapt and they can survive in like whatever we throw them in.
Sure.
Which is cool.
Sure. I am curious to hear what you think about some stuff going on in Colorado specifically. I know that there was like a proposed lion hunting ban in Colorado sometime last year. And this isn't really like a hunting podcast. I mean, we touch on like hunting here and there, and it's something I'm interested in, and I guess I do a lot of. But I'll save that for a little bit later. Let's talk about some of the features of mountain lions that make them just such like wildly efficient predators. Let's start off with the claws and jaws. What do you think?
Do we have claws?
Yeah, we should.
Pelt claws.
Oh.
No claws.
You know, I forgot about this. Dr. Beers, if you could cameraman me here. We had an unfortunate incident where our new lab puppy, Weller, not only did he chew the nose and one of the ears off this thing, he chewed every claw off this lion pelt.
No.
So I thought that we were going to have a really good example, but our lion has been disarmed.
Yeah, disarmed.
or just digited at least.
Wow.
Yeah.
He knows what he wants. He goes for the good bits.
He kind of created his own punishment when he ate,
20 claws.
20 mountain lion claws. And the only other thing is, like, coincidentally, we got him neutered about right after he did this. So maybe he thinks that that's like the punishment. And if that's the case, I'm sure he will never do that again. Yeah. Okay, well, here we can talk about let's talk about the skulls first. Mountain lion skulls are like crazy unique looking. If you found one in the wild, you would think that it was like an alien skull or something. It's like snub nose and stuff. So why don't you take me through some of the features of a mountain lion skull?
Yeah, so I mean, the forward facing eyes makes them much better as a predator, like a lot more effective.
Yeah.
But yeah, with their teeth, you've got like these carnassial molars that are really good for shearing flesh. You got that on there. And they're canines that are just like super good at grabbing and ripping apart things. They use those a lot when they're like making kills. They can like get in there and make it clean, like puncture on the trachea. And it's also like a way when we're like working with them that we can age them is looking at their teeth just because they wear down so much because they obviously have to use them a lot. This is a pretty young cat. You can see it's got all of its incisors, which is great still. These
things are kind of tuned up for killing stuff.
Yeah.
Again, we wanted to show you the claws, but Weller has declawed it. So, we're just going to put a graphic up. A graphic is over your shoulder showing a mountain lion paw right now. I guess there's really not much to say, but I call them murder mittens.
Oh yeah. Like you can just squish the little paw pads and have their claws come out.
Yeah.
I might have pictures of that.
Yeah, do you?
Yeah, okay. I'll see if I can find them.
Those are over your shoulder right now if you found them.
Right there.
Those are just like grapnel hooks. They're meant for jumping onto critters, putting that in the hide and holding on as they basically... How do lions kill their prey?
They go mostly for a bite to the trachea. Like they go for the underside of the throat. If you see, like, if you find a dead deer and you want to know what ate it or what killed it, if you see a lot of like trauma in the back end, probably not a cat. A mature cat, like a good killer, is going to go straight for the trachea and you won't even get punctures. Like you won't have blood on the outside of the trachea. You'll just have the trachea is crushed.
Really?
So like that's why these teeth are so important. And when they get older and they start to like wear down their teeth or they lose some, they're just kind of like gumming the trachea and it's not as efficient. But there'd be a lot of kills. If I got to a fresh kill during my research, there would be no wounds on the outside that you could see and we would skin the neck and you could see like a perfect like puncture wound this far apart and just like crushed trachea, hemorrhage inside the skin, but from the outside, perfectly clean.
Really?
It's awesome. If you get a young cat that doesn't really know what they're doing, they'll kind of like grab a bunch and make more of like an outside mark. But like a mature cat, once they've locked on with their paws and they're like on top of the deer and they can just one bite.
They know what they're going for.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen those videos of like the cats taking down guanaco?
I don't.
In like Patagonia?
Or guanaco, those like llama-esque things.
There's one crazy one I saw where it's just like a massive, the llama's bigger than the cat.
Yeah.
And it's just like riding it, like it's got its claws hooked in and just like looks like a bucking bronco ride. And eventually it takes it down because they get beat to shit riding on the back of these things that are bucking around, and they get like a good bite in and you just wait till you can suffocate it.
Wow.
They're incredible. They take down elk. They can take down animals way bigger than them. They can take down moose.
Wow.
They're just really cool.
I know they're mostly solitary.
Yeah.
But I do know that I guess if they were breeding pairs, it's kind of like, well, I don't know. Catherine and I go get dinner all the time together. This might be a really dumb question. Two of them ever get together and not get together, be like, hey, you want to go hunting? But if there's a group of juvenile lions, on the cusp of leaving mom, or there is a breeding pair of lions and a weak mule deer kind of walks across the trail in front of them. Do you ever see instances of two lions messing around together in that context?
I don't know if I have any evidence of them hunting together. I've definitely so we had GPS collars on a bunch of cats for my PhD research, and we had definitely cougars feeding together. So we'd have unrelated, we'd have a female with her young, obviously feeding together. We'd have what we think are maybe sisters or close relatives that would be kind of independent, but then they would come together to feed. And we also had mating pairs feeding together. But I don't know who would kill the cat, who would kill the deer. Maybe the female killed it and the male came in, but they tolerate each other because they're oh, we're mating. And, we can share food together. But I don't know necessarily how much they would pack hunt. They don't hunt like wolves.
Right, sure.
They're not going to make a strategy and surround something. Juveniles might. I actually don't know because we didn't have a ton of juveniles collared when they were independent from mom. But I doubt that it's very common, especially with adults, that they'd be hunting together.
Sure. You do see, I forget where it was. I saw a video recently of 6 lions.
Oh yeah.
Walking together. That blew my mind.
It's usually just a mom with a lot of cubs, a very successful mom. And the cubs are with her until they're bigger than she is. If it's males, they'll be bigger than her before mom kicks them out. Huh. Once they get really big, they'll start monopolizing her kills. And she's like, all right, y'all need to go. Yeah, y'all can leave. But you can see, 4 big grown kittens with mom. It's so cool.
That is super, super cool. You would think that at that point they had to do some sort of hunting together.
They're just so bad. The kittens are just really bad at hunting.
Oh, really?
They're just so awkward and they don't have patience and they don't know the tricks yet.
I would think that a lot of the hunting is pretty intentional with them. But I could also see a world where they're just so darn sneaky all the time. It's they're kind of bumping into stuff and sometimes they're okay, I'll kill that one. What is the methodology between a lion hunt as you know it? Is that a weird question?
They're pretty opportunistic. They will, if they come across something, they might try to kill it. They're not going to be hunting though. They're not anytime, with wolves, if they're moving around, we're thinking, okay, they're hunting. Cats are like that too, but a little bit less. If they're on a kill and they're moving away from that kill, they usually make a kill and then during the day they rest away from it and they don't sit right there and they will make another kill. If they're just oh, hey, there's a fawn right there. Let me just grab that little snack. So in my research, I found a lot of times where they would have 2 kills going at the same time and they would just kind of go back and forth between them. I think that's probably kind of a way to hedge their bets. If a dominant tom comes in and finds my food, or if a bear finds it or something, I want to have a second kill. Why would I pass up the opportunity to have more food? But I think when they're hunting, a lot of times they're pretty intentional. It's not, they're opportunistic for sure, but if they are hungry and they want to hunt, they are definitely intentional. They're sneaky. They're looking to ambush deer and elk in, places that funnel their movement. They're using terrain for sure. They're using snow if they can get animals into deeper snow where they have the advantage. And they're like during fawning season, they'll just snap up fawns like super fast, just go through them.
Sure.
So I think they use a lot of strategies. I think what I learned in my research most is that there's so much variation in individuals. And I think that's representative of the population because they're found in so many different ecosystems. They eat so many different things across their range. Like they're just incredibly adaptable. They're generalists and they're so good at figuring out how to make it work, how to survive with all these different pressures. So it's hard to generalize like mountain lions always do this. Like, no, that's not true. Like here's one individual that did something completely different just because he figured it out.
And they're primarily, or they're exclusively, I guess, ambush predators because they don't have, if I'm not mistaken, they don't have like a ton of stamina. Like their lung size to like body is a very obscure kind of proportion.
They're definitely not cursorial. They're not running them down like wolves. Ambush, that's why they go for like older animals, sick animals, young. They can take down like mature big elk and deer and everything, but a lot of times when they take big bulls or bucks, it's the rut.
Oh.
The males are distracted. They're running on low on their reserves, right? Because they're just out trying to get ladies. So they're not eating. They're not really focusing on anti-predator behaviors. And that's when they're the weakest link. And the females are like healthy and chunked up and they're like, hey, look at me, and the males are the dumb ones then. So we would see the amount of bulls and bucks in the kills just absolutely skyrocket during the rut, which is kind of like crazy because like you walk in and you're like, oh, that's a really nice buck. Just like he was probably a little bit too focused on following his doe and then.
Yeah, and just tuckered out from.
Yeah, and then deer
tail.
definitely don't have the stamina.
Yeah.
At that point, a cougar's going to outpace them for sure.
Do they are most of when a cougar makes and it goes to make a kill? I'm assuming that this is such a. I feel like I'm asking like a series of dumb questions right now, and I'm sure like on some level I am. I see lions in trees a whole bunch. Do they ever like tree attack stuff, or is it mostly pretty much exclusively from the
tree
ground?
is retreat.
Yeah,
that's like to get away from us.
Right.
I don't think they really ambush anything. I mean, they might use like small like junipers, but they're not going to be like up a pine, like super high up a lodge pole trying. I'm
just imagining like a wrestler, like how they jump from like the top of the cage.
Yeah.
That would
but I mean, they'll use cliffs.
Oh, really?
So especially if there's something like a travel corridor underneath, they can use those and come out. But it's not like they want the arboreal advantage. That's not necessarily. In
the Gallatin Canyon over there, I hear that they're hell on bighorn sheep sometimes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because those sheep are. You want to talk about not a very skittish animal? You could about walk up to one of those bighorns and slap it on the ass. And there's a spot that I go hang out in sometimes. I don't hang out there too much when it's like winter time, but sometimes I'm doing something that brings me up into there. I don't want to like monkey with sheep trying to get to like their winter range. But I see sheep there all the time and I cut mountain lion tracks almost every time that I'm up in there.
That's awesome.
It's really cool to see. But yeah, I mean, I would assume like coming from like those cliff faces, is a pretty great angle of attack for a lion.
But mountain lions, like, they have the advantage in like rocky cliffs compared to deer and elk, but they probably don't have the advantage with mountain lions. With sheep. Sheep are so good. Sheep and mountain goats are so good in that kind of terrain that I don't think the advantage would be as strong for them. But they also like, they'll kill because they're so adaptable, they can make kills in a lot of different areas. They prefer like rugged terrain. They prefer good cover because they can sneak up on them. But also like a lot of elk and deer also prefer those environments. So they're kind of just overlapping. Like they'll kill stuff in riparian areas where it's like, oh, hey, there's a lot of brush. I can sneak up while you're drinking and you can't hear me coming because there's a river. And they'll just pop them.
Really? I mean, yeah, I guess that makes total sense. I just don't seeing outside of maybe Florida, seeing a mountain lion in a riparian area would be just like very, very jarring to me. I'd be super, super, it's just a strange thing to see.
One of my favorite kills that I got camera footage from during my PhD was a mom with 3 kittens. She killed a cow elk right on the river.
Really?
And she tried to drag it across the river because if they kill it out in the open, they could do that. They could kill it kind of on a riparian area where there's like a little bit of shrub cover, but they want to bring it to somewhere that's safe, somewhere that has cover for they can hide it, they can cache, they can feed. She was trying to drag this cow elk across the river and it got stuck in the river. And it was like May, so there was a lot of roads around there, like winter access. We're in the Cache National Forest in Utah, but it was not open to humans yet. So she was right by a road in a river feeding on this elk for days. But it was the coolest thing because it's like they're just right in the open. And obviously that's not desirable. Like she wanted to get that kill to cover. But there was no humans around except for me because I knew where she was. But like there wasn't a lot of human activity out there. And she was like, well, I just killed this elk. Like we're not going to waste it. We're going to eat it. So when I got there, it was like wedged in the river and like little soaked, a little gross. Yeah. But they ate on it for days. It was such good footage.
That's super cool.
But she was just probably down there by the river because they have to drink, right? So she was probably down there and was like, hey, there's elk. Like, let me go grab one of these. And I mean, I obviously don't know where the actual kill happened, but where I get the data is she's on the river feeding. It was sweet. We had a lot of kills down by riparian areas. A lot of times we'd get like beaver kills there.
Beavers?
Yeah. We had a surprising number of beaver kills, which is kind of sad because beavers are super cool, but it was also awesome because you would think they'd eat the tail because it's like fatty, but they don't. But that's like a big, like a fatty meat cupcake. Beavers are probably delicious.
They are. I've caught quite a few beavers in my. Them? Yeah.
I don't think I've had beaver.
Yeah. I caught one that was. Well, here, look.
Did you catch this one?
Yep. Well,
nice.
I caught it with my buddy Steve, and this one actually had a 22 bullet just sitting on the back of its head, even though it was. Yeah, this one was 61 pounds. There's a picture of us on my Instagram with it. But yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah, 61 pounds of beaver.
That's a good meal.
Oh yeah. Do they kill beavers in the same way? Did you like analyze like the...
I don't know because so once they like eat a beaver, like when you get the pelt, it's pretty cleaned out.
Sure.
Like we weren't getting to beaver kills fast enough to look at that. The reason we could tell exactly how they killed cougar or deer or elk is because we got on them so fast and it takes them multiple days to eat a deer or elk. So they're going to like prioritize feeding in certain areas. But a beaver is like one meal. Like especially if it's not a 61 pound beaver.
Yeah, it's like a bag of chips. Like you're killing that in a sitting.
So you could see some hemorrhaging and stuff where they probably still try to go for the neck, but it's also like their teeth, like think about the scale of a cougar's bite versus on a beaver neck versus a deer neck.
Sure.
Like, so I'm assuming they go for the same thing, but we actually couldn't tell that. And we didn't get like a lot of fresh beaver kills to look at. We would find them like by the river, like, oh, there's 3.3 like GPS points here of this collared cat, and there's like a beaver pelt.
Now, we keep talking about collared cats, and I'm pretty sure people are wondering, how do you get these collars upon these cats?
Very carefully. So a lot of different projects, they will do like box traps or snares or whatever. We used houndsmen.
Okay.
So hunting cougars with hounds is legal in like almost every Western state that they are in, except for California and Texas.
Texas, huh?
No, actually you can hound hunt. The rules are different in Texas. There's no like limits or anything. So I think of like regulated hound hunting.
Okay. Doesn't
happen in Texas because Texas is kind of just free for all.
Yep.
They're not at all like managed, basically.
Yeah.
So in the West, a lot of people use hounds. We worked with volunteer houndsmen. So instead of contracting with like a government trapper or someone like that, like USDA, we used volunteers who hunted those ranges already. So they knew the terrain, they knew the cats, and they had like a vested interest in supporting the research. it was great for us because most people want to hunt toms. Like if you want to get a trophy, if you want to get a pelt and a skull or whatever, you probably want a tom. We only wanted females for my research because we didn't know as much about reproduction. And that was one of the big focuses of my work, was learning about cougar reproduction in that area. And so we'd work with hunters who were like, hey, I'm going to be out hunting anyway, but I'm not going to shoot a female. If I tree a female, do you want to collar it? So I had a couple guys. I worked in 3 different mountain ranges in Utah. So I had locals in every area who knew the area. And I had a couple guys in the Cache, because I was based in Logan, Utah. And they'd be out hunting like every morning before work. They'd go like drive roads, snowmobile around, look for tracks at like 5 a.m. And they'd say, hey, I cut a female track. They just text me, I've got a female on this creek. Like, do you want her? I was like, yeah. So I would just like jump in the car, get, my gear and everything. And a lot of times, sometimes I would go out with them and do the whole dog process, and sometimes they would catch it.
I feel like when people hear about hunting dogs,
yeah,
a lot of times what they think is that the dogs get on like the animal and like physically like bite it and pin it down and hurt that. To be clear, we're talking about, describe how one hunts a lion with dogs.
Yeah. So
from the getting up in the morning,
right.
Give me like the full thing.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I got to go out with them a lot, which was really cool because I learned about it. And before, like living in the East and in Florida, where Florida panthers are obviously not hunted, I didn't really appreciate hound hunting. And it's such a part of the culture out West and like revered, sport. It's so cool to learn from the people who like hunt because they respect the animal. They love cougars. They love bears. And this is their way of like interacting with them in their environment. So I have like a huge respect for hound hunters. Anyway, so we found some really awesome hound hunters that I would work with. So they would get up really early. A lot of times in areas where you have good road access, either like cleared roads or good snowmobile trails, they'll go out and ride the roads and look for tracks. So the easiest way to find a cat is if it comes down to cross the road overnight, comes down to water. So you're trying to cut a trail, especially after a fresh snow, you're trying to cut a track. Some of the guys, most of the time the dogs are in a box in the bed of the truck or a little trailer behind the snowmobile, which is amazing. It's just a wooden crate on skis behind the snowmobile with big old holes so the dogs can stick their heads out. So the dogs are back there, and if the human sees a track, they'll stop and they'll look at it, say, okay, is this a cat? Is this a tom? Is this a female? Based on the size, the length of the stride. Or the dogs will wind something. And if the dogs start just baying their heads off, you're like, oh, they've got the scent. So they'll drop the dogs. Like usually the hunter will get out before they release the dogs. They'll look at the track and they'll say, okay, which way is it going? Is it going into private property? I don't want to chase that. Or like make sure they know which way it is so they can put the dogs on it going the right way, not backtracking it. Or like, is this an area where I want to go? Because if I start running this cat, she's going to go up in those cliffs and there's no way we're going to get that.
Or they'll measure. The other thing that I've seen them do a bunch, I just want to make sure we get this too, because you had mentioned like, oh, I got a female track.
Right.
And I'm sure maybe listeners were like, well, how the hell do you know that? And it's a lot of times they measure like the stride length. And I think
also the paw size.
Sure.
So there's overlap between like a young male and a mature female.
Of course, yeah.
But a mature tom is going to have big feet, like way bigger than a female, and a longer stride.
Yeah.
So if you only want mature toms, you can be really selective.
I heard that, I forget if it was 42, 44, or 48, but I know a bunch of people that subscribe to the idea that anything over that stride length, 42, 44, 48 inches, again, I forget which one, is for sure a tom, almost guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting to think about how like precise they are in that.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And
go ahead.
So with our like hunts, we wanted specifically females for my work. And so a lot of times the guys would go out and they'd say, okay, this is a tom track. I'm just going to run this one because I want to, and maybe I'll harvest it. And then, sure, you go do that. If they run a female, or if they say, oh, I found a female, do you want it? And I would say, yeah, great, let's do it. If I wasn't with them, they'd text me. If I was with them, we'd turn out the dogs. And so you turn out the dogs usually have like a GPS collar. So like you would have on, your dog. And they'll let the dogs out. They'll usually put, I don't know, sometimes 3, sometimes 10, however many dogs you want, put them out on the track, and they work together. So they're like scent tracking. They're not visual tracking. They're working completely off the scent. So sometimes you'll have dogs like backtrack, or they'll get like a bear or something will cross, like in the summer or in the spring. If you're hunting, a lot of times a bear will cross and their scent is stronger. So you'll like run off on that. But anyway, so they work the trail and we just kind of hang out and like chat.
You sit by there like looking at the thing like it's a Game Boy on the...
Build a fire, you know, because it's going to be really cold sometimes. Because also almost all of this is happening in the winter.
Yeah.
It's really hard to track cats on dry ground. You can do it. And we've had some of our hounds, like really good dogs. We've caught some of our cats on dry ground where we needed to catch them to like replace a collar, and we could get him. But
that's like in Arizona, New Mexico, like people tend to do it down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys won't hunt like spring and summer here because the dogs get too hot.
Sure.
They're just, because they're running for hours sometimes if the cat's really moving. But in the winter, if there's a lot of snow, the cat will tree pretty quick. And so as soon as the dogs get the cat up in a tree, because the cat's like, oh, I don't want to be caught. I'm going to go up this tree 30 feet or 60 feet, depending on the tree, and the dogs can't climb. So the dogs are not making contact with the cat. The cat's up in the tree, chilling, safe, living its life. And we'll look and we'll say, okay, they're treed. And there's like an indicator on their collar that shows, on the dog's collar, that shows they're not moving, they're barking, they're treed.
Yeah, that's always been like kind of one of the, I've been on like a handful of these, and it's hilarious when they go, oh, Hazel's treed. Yep. And you're like, how do you know that? And it's like the barking pattern will change.
Yeah.
Like, arr, 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 arr. It'll get like real choppy or like, or so, yeah. So I guess it kind of depends on the dog. I know somebody who actually was the person that I was mentioning before, that really great houndsman. He used to hunt lions with plot hounds, which is hilarious because they're like beagle size.
Plot hounds are great. They're great hounds.
Well, one of the really, really cool things was he likes to chase bobcats around as well. And because those bobcats are more able to run for longer periods of time, because like their lung proportionality is like, I guess, more analogous with that type of activity, or more in tune with that type of activity, not analogous. The big advantage is those dogs did not bark unless something was treed.
Yeah.
That way they could kind of sneak up on the bobcat and put the bobcat up in a tree, because otherwise that bobcat just runs. Those bobcats are a pain in the ass to tree, right?
Yeah, we weren't obviously looking for them, but the people that were hunting, like helping us out by hunting, would be basically, they'd be out looking for bobcats or cougars.
Yep.
Just because it's fun for them and they can hunt both. But they were definitely catching fewer bobcats than cougars. And I don't know if that's because the bobcats are harder or there's just less of them. My
understanding is that I think there are more of them, and I think that it is because they're so much more difficult to catch, because they'll like figure eight and stuff. And I mean, I guess it makes sense when you think about it, because bobcat getting chased by like a coyote or something like that, I'm not really sure how much that happens, but like not many things are going to monkey with a mountain lion. A lot more things are going to monkey with a bobcat. And again, I think that those bobcats are just kind of so tuned up for long runs rather than that mountain lion, that if you push that thing for too long, it's just like, it gets tired.
Yeah.
It's
they tree really readily, especially when there's deep snow, because they're like, this is dumb. Why would I be running in snow when I could just go up this tree and be safe? Like,
I wonder why the bobcats don't do that the same way.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't heard chase bobcats.
That's mystery for another day.
Yeah. So anyway, you've got the hounds, they tree. Once they're kind of locked in, usually get like 3 or 4. You're like, oh, my best dogs are treed. Okay, like we're good. So then you hike out to them. So we're like in snowshoes. We've got all of our stuff. Get out there. And the guys that I worked with most of the time, they would kind of stick around and help. Sometimes they'd be like, hey, I've got to go. I've got like a birthday party or whatever. I'm like, great. Yeah. Once we get to the tree, we grab the dogs, and you want to make sure the cat's calm and isn't going to jump as soon as you like contain the dogs. But a lot of times if they ran a couple miles and the dogs are just there locked in with them treed, it would take us like an hour or two to get to the cat sometimes. If we're like slogging through deep snow, sometimes it'd be 15, 20 minutes, sometimes it's an hour. You get there and sometimes the cat would just be like asleep. Like they're not stressed in the trees. They do not care.
It's the funniest thing when you get up on one. to me, it always looks like you just woke them up from a nap.
They're like
they do
dang it.
They do like the
yeah.
the slow
And they're
blink.
like sprawled out, like the jaguar on the limb kind of thing.
Sure.
They're just out there, like, especially if you've got an adult, like especially in areas that are really heavily hunted, like the cache. Most of Utah is pretty heavily hunted for cougars. So the cats that have been treed a lot, they're like, come on, dude, I've done this before. Like, just let me go. And most of the time, because of the people like we were talking about that tree hundreds of cats and harvest one or two, the cats get treed, houndsmen get out there, they take some pictures, they say, cool, it's a female, cool, it's a male, whatever, grab the dogs and go. And the cat just waits it out.
How does one identify a male versus female cougar in a tree?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways. I mean, the obvious one is balls. If you can see those, pretty clear cut. But even with like a non-mature male, like a young male versus a female, there's a like pretty distinctive black spot that's like a couple inches below the anus. And if it's like 4 or 5 inches below, that's a male. And if you don't see that, or if it's like really tucked up right under the tail, it's a female.
Gotcha.
So that's something that's like, because it's a dark spot on such a like light colored hide, you can see it pretty well from far away.
And really diagnostic.
Really diagnostic, yeah. If you can't get your cat like to give you that angle, like where you can actually see that, you can look at the head. Toms are gonna have a much bigger head, much rounder, lower set ears, and you can also look at the teeth to kind of figure out the age.
Sure.
And so all of those clues together allow you to be more selective. So a lot of times a hunter will go up and they'll sit there and look at the cat, try to look at the head, look at the teeth, get it to move around so you can see the backside, look for the black spot or whatever. And then use those kind of points to say, okay, is this a cat that I want to take, or is this a cat that I'm going to release? And so for us, we would have hunters go out and say, hey, I think I've got a female, and they'd tree it, and we'd get to the tree. Sometimes we had a young tom, and you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, we were wrong. But that's a really easy way of making sure you don't shoot the wrong cat. Like if sometimes the head's not really that distinctive if they're young and you don't have that big, like mature tom head, but you're going to have that visible black spot on the backside.
Okay. Now you have the cat in a tree.
Yep.
You tie up all the dogs.
Yes.
And then, I mean, you don't ask the cat politely to come down, and you certainly, well, in most cases, because I know that this happens sometimes, you don't go up there and you don't climb up there. What do you do to collar this animal?
Yeah. So yeah, once we've decided it's a cat we want, we'll usually ask the houndsman to grab the dogs and pull them back, because the calmer that we are and the cat is, the better the immobilizing drugs works. So we'll usually get the dogs kind of out of sight, but ready in case the cat jumps before we can dart. And then we'll grab a dart rifle, just looks like a rifle with a scope. And we're using like a drug cocktail that we dose them based on their weight. And nice shot to the butt cheek or the shoulder. You want to get a nice muscle group. Depending on the cat, they can go down really quickly.
Have you ever been the person darting the cat?
Oh, yeah. I darted like 25 cats. It's honestly, catching cats was like the most ridiculous, fun, stressful, because I'm catching them for science. I don't want them to die. And so I have to like be really careful about what I'm doing. But such a cool experience that I never dreamed I would get when I was a kid.
Sure.
Like when I learned that you could do this for a living, I never thought I'd get to actually be the one doing it. So we dart the cat. We want him. You kind of have to judge your tree. I was doing this in Utah, and like a lot of our trees that the cats would be up in aren't that tall. Like we're not in like Oregon or Washington where a cat's 60 foot up a tree. They're usually like 20, 30 foot up. And you pull the dogs, you kind of look at the cat's behavior and say, okay, she's really calm or she's really jumpy. If she's pretty jumpy, as soon as you dart, as soon as the dart hits, they'll usually jump. If it's a good hit, it'll take the cat 5-10 minutes to fall asleep. So we use a dart that's got a little barb, and it goes in, gets stuck, delivers the drug. And if the cat jumps and the dogs are contained, they'll, as soon as they get a little bit out of earshot of us, they're so much calmer, and they're just kind of find somewhere to hide because they're like, oh, I feel kind of funky, and they'll just like fall asleep, like under a tree. And then
I
you
was
just
gonna say, do you find a lot of in tree wells and stuff?
tree wells or just like in the trail because they're like, oh, I don't feel so good. And then it hits.
Oh,
So, they can go down really fast if it's a good dose. So we'll follow. Usually at that point, we're like, okay, she's calm. She's walking. She's not running. We'll have the hounds, like the houndsman will take them back to the truck or leave them tied up and we'll just follow the tracks to find the cat. Other options of how this goes down is you dart the cat and she doesn't jump, or she jumps before you dart. So if she jumps before you dart, release the dogs again, which is why we didn't take them totally out of the forest, and re-tree. Or if it's like she's in too steep of a tree or too high or directly above a cliff, like we're not going to dart a cat in that kind of situation. So we'll jump her. We'll like pull the dogs, throw some sticks and rocks up there, try to get the cat to jump down, release the dogs and re-tree to put her in a better spot for us so that she's safer and we're safer trying to get this cat collared. Which is why like the finesse and like the skill of the houndsman is really important to be able to say like, oh, I can tree her over there. Like I can guide her basically to get into the tree we want. Okay, so then you dart. Scenario A, she jumps down, she walks a little, she falls asleep. Great scenario. Scenario B, she falls asleep in the tree. You cannot get her to jump. So like usually if I dart, I'll give her 2-3 minutes of silence of like dogs are pulled away. We're all really quiet. 2-3 minutes to get the drugs to start hitting. Then we go, okay, get her out of the tree. So then someone starts climbing the tree. We throw sticks. We try to get her to jump down.
so she's still has some of her faculties
Yes.
enough that she can get herself down,
Yes.
but not so many that she's going to pose a real immediate threat to
Right.
the people who are.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Or like you climb up the adjacent tree. You don't necessarily want to go up the same tree unless it's your only option because that's her exit ramp and you never want to be in the way of an animal's exit ramp, especially a predator. So we'll climb up the adjacent tree. We'll throw some rocks up, whatever. Try to get her to jump down on her own. So then we can just go find her on the ground. We've had some where like 5 minutes, they are out stone cold, like super fast. If the cat is really, really relaxed when you get to that tree, they're going to go under really fast. They're not fighting the drugs. And so then scenario C or B, the cat falls asleep in the tree. We cannot get it out. So we have to climb up and get it. And we had ropes sometimes that we used, but we also didn't always bring them. If we're hiking like several miles through the snow, it's a lot of extra weight. And probably 80% of the time the cat would jump as soon as the dart hit, so we didn't have to worry about it. But 20% of the time the cat fell asleep in the tree and we had to go extract it. So someone would climb up the tree, me, a tech, another houndsman, sometimes the houndsmen because our houndsmen were amazing. Like we would not have done this project without them. Climb up, put a piece of like rope webbing kind of around their middle and lower them down to someone who's at the bottom. And we had these like collapsible gurneys, basically like first aid evac gurneys that you can stick in a backpack that we would use as like a fireman's tarp.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So we would try to lower them down if the rope was not long enough. We just have to like drop them into this tarp. So yeah, a lot of times I was the person who was up there like pulling the cat off of the branch. I think I have a really cool picture. Let me see if I can find it there was a cat that I shimmied out on a limb and had to like pull the cat basically into my lap and then lower it to my tech. And I was like, this is the wildest thing I've ever done in my life. Like a limp, very asleep cat just in my lap. Like it was great. It was really cool.
How cool.
It's so cool. We had a couple times where the cat would fight the drug. Either it wasn't a good hit. If the barb doesn't go in all the way and they get a partial dose, you'd have to redose. So I'd climb trees and like poke them with a syringe and get a little more drug in there. We had a couple where they were just walking really slow and they never went down. And so you had to like kind of sneak up on them when they were like resting and like redart, like a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah.
Best scenario, they jump down, they fall asleep. Everyone's happy.
Cool. Okay.
So now we've got the cat on the ground.
Cat's on the ground.
Yeah. So then we just do a pretty standard like workup if you're doing
how do you work
animal
up a line?
captures. So at that point we have the cat on the ground. They're under a combination of drugs that they could spontaneously wake up. They're pretty stable, but we still want to limit like touch and noise. So really chill situation. We get them on their side, tongue out, make sure their airway is clear. Face mask, because sometimes they don't shut their eyes, and having the face mask keeps it dark, and then we're likely to stay calm and relaxed and asleep. And then for our workups, we do body measurements. We take the weight. So we'd put them in our little catch gurneys and hang them with a suitcase scale, that you pick up. We'd weigh them like that, which was, since we were only catching females, we didn't have anything over 100 pounds. We had
Gotcha.
We had a couple toms that were like 120, 130, but most of the time we were catching females. So we could just, team pick up the scale.
And what's about the average size of a female mountain lion? A mature female mountain lion.
In my study areas, we had 80 pounds.
What's the average size of a mature male mountain lion?
I don't know. We didn't catch anything bigger than 130. Okay. So Utah, you can get way bigger cats. Like, I don't know how much this one weighed.
Yeah. I don't either.
But I think, 120, 130 would be pretty normal, or like maybe small.
But I know that you can get them up all the way up to 200.
Yes. Not in Utah. Yeah. So all of my work, our areas were so heavily hunted that we never caught mature old toms. We never caught any over 4 years old. Gotcha. So they're not getting as big if they're harvested early.
Yeah.
But we had like 100-pound female. Like, we had some honking females, which like you get them up in the tree and you're like, oh, is that a male? It's huge. And they're like, no, that's just a very successful lady.
Cool.
So we'd weigh them. We'd take blood. We took a bunch of samples to do different analyses on. We took fecal samples, which was always exciting, fresh from the booty. We took blood. We took tissue. We took hair, because we wanted to do a bunch of different analyses. We did like genetics and everything. But basically, we're assessing the animal's health, looking for wounds, we would look at all their claws, their feet, see if we had some that were missing toes from like injuries or whatever, get frostbite on the ears, to kind of do a whole, health workup, weight, and then teeth and nipple condition. So we wanted to know if our females had kittens, like currently or in the past. And then we wanted to know their age. So using the gum recession on these teeth right here, you can tell if the gums are pushed back over this ridge. I don't know if you can see it that close, but there's like a ridge on that tooth. And it's pretty variable, but it's a pretty good indication of approximate age. If you don't see any of that ridge, that's a young cat. If you start seeing it pushed back, it's a more mature cat. And so, we'd want to age them, and we'd want to know sex, age, weight, health, GPS collar, and ear tags, so we could identify them just on camera because they're pretty similar looking. And once we got all the stuff we needed, we would give them a drug that reverses the sleepy drug and wait 5-10 minutes until they waddle off on their own. And it's like the coolest experience to be sitting there measuring a cat's teeth as they're breathing, a like big mature mountain lion, and then cool. 10 minutes later you're just like watching it walk off wearing some new jewelry. Speaking
of, describe the I have a couple questions about the collars. Number one, describe the collar. Number two, if it is a younger cat and say you decide to collar, do you collar younger cats ever, or only like ones that you're like, this one has grown about as big as it has?
Yeah. So for our, like the IACUC thing, the regulations for animal research mandates the size of how much the collar can weigh compared to the animal.
Gotcha.
So the collars we used were GPS collars. They were transmitting to the satellite. They have big honking batteries, and they can last for like 3 years, transmitting every day.
Okay.
So the cat has to be big enough to wear that much weight. So our personal guideline was like 55 pounds. If it's under 55 pounds, we're not putting a collar on it, because we just want to make sure that it's not impeding their life. Because also, like, they need to be sleek and fast. And if they feel kind of weighed down by this collar, like, we don't want to put anything on this animal that's going to like mess with it. If we had a smaller cat, we would do ear tags and take all the samples too, but we wouldn't collar it. But even we had a couple younger cats that were like 55 to 65 pounds, and we knew they were going to grow. So we put the collar on loose. The collar's just like a leather belt. We could put a picture up if we want.
Sweet.
And you adjust. It's like your belt. You adjust where you want it and you put the
Or like a dog collar.
bolts. Yeah. But it doesn't expand. So we would put the collars on loose with some foam padding around the neck.
Gotcha.
And that foam padding would just, eventually squish down and fall off because it's just like electrical taped on. But it gave them a few more months of growing before they would fill that collar out. And we could have it looser without having it. You don't want it like jostling.
Sure.
Some of the you do need to get the collar pretty tight because there's been cats that have broken their jaw when the battery pack hangs right here. And if it's too loose, if they go to pounce on an animal, it'll pop them. It's
gotcha. Wow.
Obviously then that cat's going to die. They can't hunt. So we want to avoid that.
What do they have any mechanism? Do those collars just stay on them until the cat dies?
You can have drop-off collars. They have a separate little firing pin mechanism that you can time, or sometimes you can remotely access it from your computer and say, okay, I'd like you to drop. That's what we had when I did deer research. We had remote drop collars.
Cool.
And we'd be like, oh, let's decollar this one. You push a button and then within 24 hours, it goes, just drops off. Can you imagine being a deer?
That would scare the hell.
Right? Just living your life. You're like, I've gotten used to this thing on my neck for 2 years and all of a sudden there's a mini explosion and the collar just falls off. It works really well.
Yeah, sure.
We used the drop-off mechanisms the first year of my study, but the cats are a lot harder on the collars. Just think about when they're getting chucked around trying to make a kill.
Yeah, so having that little weak link.
We had a lot of premature failures. Sure. So the second and third years of my study, we did not use the drop-off mechanisms. So those cats did have those collars on until they died. A lot of our cats ended up getting harvested, so it wasn't that bad. And they don't really bother them, especially if there's a good weight ratio. They've lived 3 years with this collar on, they'll be fine.
What sort of things do you aim to learn through these studies? Are you just assessing the general health and the abundance of lions in a given area, or are you looking for disease monitoring? Are you looking for predictive stuff? Explain that to me. All of that?
Yeah. We've studied everything about them. My study specifically, I wanted to know more about reproduction. So that's why we collared females. We also collared kittens with an entirely different collar. That's obviously much smaller and expandable, to look at how long kittens survive and what environmental things influence the kitten survival. I did a huge predation study. So we were going to kill sites of cougars and we wanted to learn about how they interacted with bears mostly, other scavengers in the environment. So we had a bunch of collars out for that. And we're looking at space use. We're looking at how do they use the landscape in the winter? How do they use the landscape compared to collared deer and elk? Because Utah had a ton of collared deer and elk. So we could use that data too. Also population modeling. We did genetics. We did health. We did the first health screening basically of what diseases are prevalent in Utah. Kind of compared to some other populations. But yeah, once we had the cats in hand, that's why we took so many samples, because you could do so much. And once you have the GPS collar data, you can build predictive models for predation. You can build models that teach you about where they're going to den. We could see interactions between cats. Like I was talking about earlier, we had unrelated and individuals sharing kills, which is a level of social behavior that isn't really common. And then we were able to actually put cameras on kill sites because we got into those kill sites really fast. So we could look at cougar behavior. And that's really hard to do with wild animals, with not zoo animals, to get behavior of them at a kill just doing natural things.
Oh, that's so wild. And a lot of this stuff, this isn't really a hunting podcast ever. Obviously, I touch on it here and there. I think a lot of people are under the impression, if they don't know anything about hunting, that hunting is pretty much somebody goes out in the woods and kind of shoots whatever they want, and then they bring it back and do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But a lot of this kind of research that you're doing goes into things like establishing hunting seasons and quotas for certain areas. And can you talk about that real quick? Just how much consideration kind of goes into things like quotas, seasons, the amount of tags issued, things like that. It's all pretty much based upon the research that you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely should be.
Right.
So that was one of the things that obviously cougar hunting is like very important to the cougar hunters. It's a big thing in Utah. And so part of the reason we worked with the houndsmen is to kind of also learn from them, like, what are your concerns? What do you want to see with this population? So getting a good count on cougars is really hard because they are so elusive. They're solitary. They have these huge home ranges. You can't just go out and like fly and count them like you could with elk.
Sure.
So one of the things that we're trying to do is get a better way to estimate abundance. And my work, we did a little bit of that, but it wasn't really the focus of my work. There's some other one of my lab mates is doing that right now in central Utah. But some of that information about how many kittens survive per female, how often do females reproduce, like, so what's their potential addition to the population? That goes into learning about how the population is growing.
Is that fecundity or recruitment?
Fecundity. Okay, so recruitment is how many get to a certain age.
Okay.
Fecundity is how many you produce.
Okay. So it's both.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like you can have 4 kittens in a litter. You could have 6 kittens in a litter, but if you only raise 2 to survival to like an age where they're actually going to contribute to the population, that's a very different, metric in your math about how is this population growing. Looking at predation, specifically like what are they eating? Are they eating elk? Are they eating deer? How many deer are they eating? That goes into informing a lot of management recommendations because if you have, data that shows our elk are declining or our deer are declining and we have so many cougars, people are going to push that and say, okay, well, this means we need to reduce cougars. There's some argument for that. My feeling is that Utah specifically is a very ground up system. It's so dry. It's a bottom up system. So the amount of water, the amount of moisture affects the vegetation. The amount of vegetation affects the amount of elk and deer. The amount of elk and deer affects the amount of cougars. So
it's not as if and obviously there are like some scenarios where it's like kind of the opposite. It's like this is a very, water rich, plant rich, there is nothing that is going to mitigate the amount of ungulates other than the amount of predators.
Right. So, and there's a lot, if you look in the literature, there's a lot of pushback on, are they top regulated or bottom regulated? And Utah, from what I can tell, is extremely bottom up because of that arid system. And especially like I worked in the Book Cliffs, which is a really arid sandstone, high elevation desert. But there are some areas where, it's probably foreseeable that like cougars are eating deer and elk that would have survived because there's a lot of vegetation. There's not a lot of hunting. There's a lot of habitat, whatever. But in these systems, they're not an additive source of mortality. They're a compensatory source of mortality in I would say most of Utah, if not all. But that balance of how many elk and deer are they eating? How many elk and deer do we think we have? How many cougars do we think we have? Absolutely informs game management and informs how many tags do we do we sell? Sure.
So that's like kind of like an interesting thing to think about. In Montana, there are WMUs, wildlife management units, and some of them are as big as counties. I mean, like they're massive. And they allot, like the quota is like, they'll give out as many tags as people want.
Yeah.
But they'll put it on a quota system. So, I think in the one where I lived last year or the year before, it was like 28 total lions and not 14 of them could be females. So, and once 14 females hit, even if it was, even if they were still, 14 more lions, so they got to 28, they just shut the season down.
A lot of states do that. And I really like that sex-based quota because then it incentivizes people to shoot males because females are the ones that are going to sustain the population, obviously. But it also kind of asks that people are a bit more selective with their harvest. But if you know the season's going to close and you've been running dogs for days and this is the first line you've got, you have to make that choice as a hunter.
Sure.
In Utah, they weren't sex-specific quotas, so we did have quotas on most of our units. And
how many lions, just like roughly, are you talking about? Because I have my perspective on it. Sure, you have more direct experience. how many lions, give me like a square mileage of one of these units. And it doesn't have to be like an actual one. And then give me like the amount of lions that might be taken off that mileage. So like, are we talking 300 square miles and 15 lions? Are we talking
how big is the cache? I mean, our hunting units kind of varied. The ones I know the most, like the cache. So I don't know the mileage. We could measure it and do some math. It's large.
It's right here.
It's right here. Yeah. So, I mean, it's from Idaho, from the border all the way down the Bear River Range to basically the bottom of that valley. On both sides of the valley, there's 2 mountain ranges in there. They would harvest about 30 cats a year, which is a ton.
Yeah.
It's a big area, but that's a lot of cats. And that's mostly a function of these cats are moving a lot, and they're moving at a much larger scale than we're managing for in Utah. I don't know about the Montana units, sound like they're a lot bigger, but the Utah hunt units aren't that big compared to a cougar's home range. So you have a lot of cats moving between areas, and we think we had a lot of cats coming in from Idaho because regulations are different. And so if they get heavily hunted, they're going to come into our units to kind of escape that pressure. But they would have it was like 28 to 30 cats cap on the cache for the first couple years of my research. But we would still find every year 30 cats because they're so adaptable that like as soon as there's a vacancy, it's like, oh, you took that dominant tom out, his home range is open. You'd have cats move in.
Cool.
They're so good at doing that.
What are your views on hunting lions?
I don't like unregulated hunting. I don't like when there's no cap, right? Because that's not sustainable for the population. I think the system with the sex-specific quota is great because it does kind of force hunters to make more selective choices. But I think that people should have the opportunity to hunt. I mean, I think, especially because it allows you to be selective, and because for so many of the hunters we worked with, it's just like part of their lifestyle. And some of the guys I worked with a guy in the Manti who had been hunting that area. He guides elk and deer hunts and bear hunts and cougar hunts. And that's his career. I don't know that he's shot a cat in 30 years, but he has amazing dogs, and that's just like his lifestyle. He just loves it. Yeah,
it's almost like when people fox hunt with like the horses. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It's just the sport. Well, and that's why it's like catch and release fishing, because then you can catch the same cat year after year and you're like, oh yeah, she's doing good. Like this one's missing an ear. Like I know her, and so I think, I mean, I like hound hunting. I think it's a really cool way for people to engage with cougars, with animals that you would never see, right? If you're out in the woods, they're out there. You're not going to see them.
I've only ever seen, I was trying to call in another animal one time, and I had a lion sneak up on me. Like, that's awesome. Luckily it like snuck up on me downhill, and I saw it. And I thought it was a deer behind this bush. And it took, because I just saw like a tan blur, and I just like wasn't really thinking about it. And then I saw a big ass like tail.
That's amazing.
I was like, ooh. Yeah. I was like, that's spooky.
Well, and that's the thing is they're such cool animals because they're so quiet. And like when I worked in Florida, I worked in Florida Panther country. I was doing deer work, but my boss at the time told me, Florida Panthers will see you. And if you're lucky, you'll see them too. But like, they're there, they're like, you're living amongst them, but you're not going to know it. So I think cougar hunting, if it's well managed and done ethically, totally fine.
We found a track from that lion because I was like, I wanted to make sure because like I only glimpsed it.
Yeah.
That track was about the size of that coaster and then half again.
Nice.
I mean,
big boy.
Big boy.
That's
big
awesome.
Boy. I would have had a problem. And also like through the sale of these tags, you get a lot of funding for your science.
Yes. We love that. We love Pittman Robertson funds. Yeah. So, I mean, and a lot of times hunters are huge advocates for wildlife research because, like I said, with the people who really love the species and they want to see the species do well, they want to support it. So like one of my houndsmen, who's a good friend now, he would always buy a cougar tag, but he was like, I'm not going to shoot it. Like I'm doing it to support the research and support the hunting, whatever. So he'd be out hunting. We'd tree a cat. He'd go, darn, forgot my tag at the house. Just because like the harvest tag part. But like he wants to support hunting. He wants that to be an option because he loves doing it. It's part of his lifestyle, but he doesn't want to kill them. He wants to do pursuit. Sure. And I think I think Utah has a specific pursuit season too, where you can train dogs
Yep.
and there's no harvest. So I don't know. I think if it's done well, I think it's a great method of hunting. And it worked well for us because we got a lot of collared cats out of it.
Yeah.
Without injury, without,
Yeah. And it really is like, people might be hearing this and going like, oh, sure. Like the good, that really does seem to be the attitude of, I would say, the majority of houndsmen that I've interacted with.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that same unnamed houndsman, he had an opportunity. And again, this is a dude who's seen hundreds and hundreds of cats.
Yeah.
He had an opportunity to take what he was sure would have been the new state record. And he's like, nah, I just don't need to kill that cat.
Yeah.
Which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
And then you see things like, I wrote an article one time about this, but in 1964, right, they moved from they eliminated the bounty system in Colorado. Like, because when, as I'm not telling you, I'm telling like the listeners, when people came out here, you'd have a lot of livestock confrontations or conflicts between, livestock and cougars. So they put a bounty on them, pretty much like decimated the cougar population in Colorado. In 1964, they remanaged them as a huntable, as a game animal. And since then, the population, like since that point, since them going, this is now a game animal, it's regulated, there were like a handful of cougars left in the state.
Yeah.
Now it's the most cougar dense state in the lower.
Yeah.
I guess probably North America, right? There are more.
Probably.
Are there cougars in Alaska?
Yes. I look to you. I haven't been to Alaska.
There are definitely cougars in Southeast.
Okay.
And they show up further north every now and then. One was seen in Katmai in 2016, very briefly. But that's like definitely way outside their normal range.
Interesting. Speaking of people in a human or livestock human conflict, I hear a lot of people all the time say things like, oh yeah, like mountain lions and grizzly bears, like and wolves, like they freak me out. I was like, okay, grizzly bears.
Grizzly bears, sure.
I hear you.
Terrifying.
Wolves, mountain lions. I don't think you got to worry about them. Number one, wolves, certainly not. Mountain lions.
Every once in a while.
I do know that that's like happened.
Yeah.
But also my thing is, if a mountain lion wanted you, like it'd be very quick.
Mm-hmm. We're not their search image for food, right? Like they don't see a human and go, oh yeah, that looks like what I want to eat. That's the shape of an elk. Like, no, we move differently. We smell different. In heavily hunted areas, cougars are so like used to and want to get away from humans because they're like, oh, humans bring dogs. They put me in trees. They might shoot me. They harass me. I don't want to be near them. Like, they're not gonna hunt you down. I walked into hundreds of cougar kills alone in the state of Utah, and I was never concerned about being a snack. If you were walking into bear kills, yeah, you absolutely would get murdered.
Yeah, you get tuned up.
Yeah. But cats, like, they don't protect their kills like bears would. If I was walking, so we specifically part of my research was we tried to get into that kill as soon as it was made. So GPS collar accumulates a bunch of points. We look at the data and we say, oh, she's been sitting here for 8 hours. That's probably a kill. So the next day I would go hike out to it and see what they're eating, try to get a camera so I could record some of the behaviors and whatever. A lot of times the cougar was there when I got there. And I had a couple times where I could see from the data afterwards that the cougar moved away as soon as I walked in with the timestamps, 200 yards, and then came back. There was one time I had a female and her 13-month-old kitten collared, and they were still together. And I walked up to a kill, and I'm making noise. Like, I'm not in the woods trying to be elusive. I'm trying to be very obvious that I'm there. So I'm just singing. I'm narrating what I'm seeing. I've been hiking for an hour and a half. I haven't seen any humans. And I get to this kill site, and I look down and go, oh, cougar tracks. Wow, those are fresh. And I'm just talking out loud. And I can start scanning, and I see what I'm looking for is a deer or elk cached.
Halfway buried.
Buried in grass, pine needles, dirt, branches. So I'm looking for a lump of vegetation, basically. And I start scanning, and I scan and I see this lump of vegetation that I'm like, oh, cool, that's a deer. That's probably a kill. And then I keep scanning, and then I see a brown lump, and I go, oh, another deer. And it lifts up its head, and it's the 13-month-old kitten, looks me in the eyes and goes, oh no, and just hauls. So the kitten was like not smart enough to realize that like I smell like a human, I sound like a human, I'm coming towards her. So she didn't leave.
Right.
I looked at the data afterwards and the female and the kitten were both there, like right before I got there. The timestamp, they had data points every 1 or 2 hours, depending on the caller. I forget which this was. But when I got there, the female, the adult, was 200 meters away. The kitten, I saw her, was not 200 meters away. She ran like a mile because she got spooked. Sure. And then the female came back like 30 minutes after I left. The female got to come back and keep feeding. And the kitten took a couple hours to come back because she just got her.
She was just so scared.
She just wet her pants. Yeah. But yeah, the adults are like, I don't want to mess with you. You've already collared me and darted me in the butt and put collars on me. Like, I'm not trying to get into this again. But the kitten just wasn't like, doesn't have the experience to know that. So like a lot of times if you're catching, like hunters catch young cats disproportionately to their availability just because they're not good enough at getting away yet. They don't have like the street smarts, if you will. But it was the coolest experience because I knew they were traveling together. I like looked at this cat and I was like, oh, and I couldn't tell from looking at her if it was the adult or the female because the kitten was just as big as the mom at that point. But with the GPS data, I could tell like the mom moved away, preventing a conflict, and the kitten didn't. And I wouldn't have, like a human, like a hiker could have just walked upon that and wouldn't have known. But the cat was just like, oh no, you found me, and ran. It was so funny. So it's like, yeah, they don't want to defend their kills. They also don't really defend their kittens that much. Like you obviously don't want to walk up to a den because they will like mock charge.
Yeah.
But we caught kittens in their dens. Like with lots of people and, bear spray and precautions, we're able to go in there and pick up the kittens without having to dart the mom. If you're catching bears, usually put the mom to sleep because she will defend them. So they're so conflict averse, which is great. Like, I think, and this is one of the things I think is really cool about cougars is because they're solitary and they have to catch their own food. They are so conflict averse. If they get hurt, they die. If they break their leg, if they break their jaw, if they can't hunt, they die.
They're a finely tuned machine. Right.
And they're really good at what they do, but they can only rely on themselves. If a wolf gets hurt hunting, his pack is going to feed him. But if a cougar gets hurt, if they try to fight a bear to keep their food or try to fight me because I'm coming into their den, like that's a death sentence for them if they get hurt. So
yeah, I think they're going to have better luck with you than the bear.
Fair. Yeah, I'm not really going to do much. But they don't know that. I could have a gun.
That's true.
I could be a hunter. So I think because they're so they would rather run and leave their kills, their kittens, whatever.
That's fine. I'll make more kittens. I'll make more deer.
Food. Right. Which is why I'm not scared of them in the woods. They don't want to come into contact with humans. They really don't. And so every once in a while you'll get an attack and it's obviously really sad and tragic, but I hate when it gets blown up into this like villainization of like cougars are going to kill you. They're hunting you. Like they don't want to hunt you. They really don't. They want to be far away from you.
We're going to do some listener questions.
Awesome.
So I source all these from Instagram. If you guys want to get your questions answered, we do these like pretty frequently, like once every handful of episodes. Sometimes we release them as bonus content. Sometimes we release them as part of the episode. The best way to get your questions answered is to follow me on Instagram. I know that sounds like a pitch, but that's really like the best way that I source these. It's Hayden_Samak. Here's a link right here. Follow that. We can even put one of those cards up there. You can find my Instagram in the description. I love connecting with you guys. I love connecting you with my buddies like, Dr. Kristin, Dr. Hayden over there. We have all sorts of interesting people. We've done Q&As with astronauts. We've done Q&As with legendary climbers, Everest historians, all sorts of really good folks. So if this is something that you guys are into, make sure to follow me. Eventually we'll end up moving this to like a Patreon thing, but not right now. Now it's open to everybody. So check it out and leave your questions because then we can answer them and that's cool. You get to participate. Everybody likes to participate. Unless you're an introvert. Then maybe not. Okay. Question number 1. This question comes from Zan703. That's XAN 703. numbers left and extinction risks across breeds. So I don't really think he means breeds. I think what he means is like Florida panther versus like a Florida panther. That's a distinct subspecies, right?
Yeah. So genetically, all pumas are the same species.
Yeah.
There's not different breeds of pumas, but there are subspecies. So Florida panthers are probably the most notable subspecies. I think the most recent genetic information is that pretty much all of the North American pumas are really closely related. They're all one subspecies or lack thereof. For Florida panthers, there's about 200, I think, maybe a little more right now. They were down to about 30 cats in, I think, the 80s. And there was this big genetic reintroduction where they brought in some pumas from Texas, which were the geographic closest relative.
Sure.
Brought them in. They let them breed for, I don't know, it was a short time, a few months maybe or a year. They actually caught the Texas cougars and removed them. So they just had their genetics in the population, and those females that got bred then made babies. But they're up to about 200. And that's the most vulnerable population right now of cougars because they are so geographically isolated from their closest relatives. And Florida panthers, I'm specifically biased because that's where I'm from and that's the ones I learned about first, but they really can't expand.
Being a Florida woman makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Oh, is that like a Florida man?
Yeah.
I don't. I hope I'm not a Florida woman.
A little bit.
We'll see. But yeah, so they can't really expand. They can only go north. There's water obviously on east, west, and south. North, there's like sugar plantations in Disney World, so they can't really go anywhere else. So they're probably the most vulnerable to extinction with continued development of any remaining wilderness down in South Florida. They're going to lose more habitat. They can't really expand much farther north without extensive efforts of people to protect more land. Which is, people are trying to do that in Florida. There's some really good work with the Florida corridor trying to kind of expand that, but that's probably the most at-risk population. The other one that's really at risk would be the like Santa Monica, the city cougars in California. And they are like around LA and everything, penned in by development, interstates. They have really low genetic variability because they're in this really isolated area where they're all just pretty inbred. But the rest of the pumas, like if you think about pumas in Montana, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, they have pretty clear freedom to move around. There's not huge barriers to their movement. They can cross interstates. They can cross rivers if they need to. So as long as they have connectivity, like genetic connectivity, they can do pretty well. And that was something we actually did some genetic analysis in my PhD. And we found that there's not a lot of genetic separation across the state of Utah. There's a little bit kind of north to south. And I think it's related to that Salt Lake metropolitan area. But they can move pretty freely around and they're really good at adapting. So overall, Puma concolor, there's not a big risk. They're pretty stable in areas like, California and Florida where they're more isolated. That's where you'd have a little bit more concern, but pretty stable across the rest of their range.
Cool. These are two kind of similar questions, and these are just kind of funny to me. One is from William Price V, and one is from Matanuska.Jim. William Price V says, how many mountain lions would it take to take out 100 men? And Matanuska Jim says, would you rather fight one mountain lion-sized squirrel or 500 squirrel-sized lions?
Oh, no.
So let's start. How many mountain lions do you think it would take to take out 100 men?
I mean, what's the time span here? One lion could take out 100 men.
I think what they're imagining is like a lion and man melee.
I mean, if they're just going in for the kill and not like eating them, you could do quick work of 100 men. Men aren't that good at fighting.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just a numbers
10?
thing. I would think that 10 mountain lions could probably beat 100 dudes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we just fist to paw?
Yeah,
like we don't have weapons. Fist to paw.
This is hand to claw combat. Yeah. And then would you rather fight one mountain lion sized squirrel or 500 squirrel sized mountain lions? I think the mountain lion sized squirrel for sure.
Mountain lion sized squirrel would be terrifying, but they don't really have weapons.
What he's asking you is like, would you rather fight
a giant squirrel?
A giant squirrel, or would you rather fight 500 pine marten? You know,
I mean, the pine marten, yeah.
I would much rather fight one big squirrel. This is so stupid. People are going to stop listening to this. Let's move on. Okay. A-Faye says, how big are the babies? Describe the size of a mountain lion kitten. Let's say through several stages. Let's say immediately after birth, 1 month, 3 month, 1 year.
Okay. So immediately after birth, they're like itty bitty, eyes shut, like a house
kittens,
cat. Yeah. If your house cat had kittens, they're teeny tiny. Eyes shut, ears shut, tiny little beans. The earliest I've ever had my hands on cats was 2 weeks. And I can throw a picture
of
a little 2-week-old, a couple kittens that were about 2 weeks old. We were trying to find the mom and we accidentally found the den, which was exciting.
Yeah.
We typically caught kittens about 5 to 6 weeks old, and they were, I think it was about 2.5 pounds. So we were getting them at 5 or 6 weeks and putting these like itty bitty little collars on them, but we had to weigh them because obviously you can't have the weight of the collar be, more than 5% of their body weight. So they're 5 to 6 weeks. They're like
football size?
Yeah, I was going to say like small Chihuahua or like a Yorkie.
Oh, okay.
Like
a shoebox.
Proportionally different.
Yeah.
Because they're much more leggy.
Mm-hmm.
But you can pick them up. They're pretty sturdy at that age. Their eyes are open.
Maybe the size of a normal house cat?
Smaller.
Okay.
Smaller than a normal house cat at that age. And more like, the proportions of babies are like everything's shorter and thicker.
Yeah.
They're like that. Like a house cat, but shorter and thicker.
Yeah. Big heads.
Big heads. And then their collars were designed to stay on till, we try to get them to 6 to 8 months. But by 6 to 8 months, they're long. They're like bigger than juniper. And they're getting like, the males are getting pretty big by that point, the male kittens. About a year, male kittens are bigger than their mom. The female kittens would be 50 to 65 pounds. The male kittens would be 70, 80 by a year. So they might be skinnier than their mom, but they're bigger than her.
Yeah.
So they grow really fast. And it was cool because we got to go in and catch them at 5 or 6 weeks. And then we got footage of them on camera growing up. So we could actually put some pictures, that kind of show that. Yeah.
Cool. Sam Abney, 07, wants to know, what is the average lifespan?
That is really dependent on where you live. If you are in an area that's heavily hunted, like that's the main cause of mortality for toms in areas where there's hunting.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We didn't catch any toms over 3 or 4 years old. We weren't targeting toms for my research, but we never really saw anything over 4 or 5. So they don't live that long in the wild. They also fight each other for, territory. So toms will kill each other.
And you think that is definitively because of hunting?
That's the largest, in most studies, the largest source of mortality is human harvest. In most studies where they're legally hunted, where there's a lot of hunting, we had a couple cats, so I collared probably 50 adult mountain lions and about 50 kittens over a 3-year study. Almost all of my mortality was harvest on the adults. I had a couple natural causes. I had one starved, looked like she had a broken shoulder, so she couldn't hunt. I had one that had one got hit by a car, which is a big source of mortality in certain areas. In Florida panther land, like that's a huge source of mortality because they're not hunted. The toms, they'll fight. They might kill each other. Males will kill females. Males will definitely kill kittens, but a human harvest is a huge part of the mortality.
Interesting.
So the females I had a female that was probably 11 or 12 years old. Yeah, they can live a long time. She was really good. She produced a lot of kittens for us and like was just really hard to catch. So if you can avoid getting treed, you're gonna live a long time.
Yeah, and I guess also that sort of speaks to the selectivity that you were talking about that hound hunting allows, because there's such a disparity between the oldest tom you caught and the oldest lioness that you caught.
And you don't need the males to live to older ages. I mean, it's nice because they get bigger and they are cooler trophies for people that want to hunt them, but you just need them to be able to breed. You really need the females to live and to be able to get their kittens. Oh my God, this is adorable. Get their kittens to recruitment age. Yeah. And so, yeah, we had several cats that were 8, 9. I think our oldest was like 11 or 13-year-old female, and she had no teeth in her head. It was amazing. We caught her twice. The second time, I mean, she's got like 1 canine left, and she's still making kills and feeding kittens. Like it was very impressive.
I love that. Okay. Brent.stock_ wants to know lion/coyote relationships in areas where lions are expanding their range, like the Midwest.
Coyotes cougars.
And you could expand this to wolves too. Like,
cougars beat coyotes. Obviously. Yeah. So they're not necessarily going for the same prey. Coyotes are going to be hunting smaller things. If they can take down deer, like sometimes they can, sure. But they're mostly going to be scavenging. I think in areas where cougars are expanding and coyotes have always been there, they might actually be, I'm not sure if it'd be a net benefit, but they provide a lot of benefits. They do a lot of, they're providing carcasses basically. So a cougar is going to eat something, they kind of high grade. They're going to go into the chest cavity and eat the heart and the lungs and all the good organs. They're going to eat the hams. They're going to, get the good meat. And then if there's an abundant prey source, they're not going to sit there and just like chew the like sinew, So they'll leave, and coyotes are like, great, I'll eat that. Bears will eat that. A lot of other species. So they really facilitate mesocarnivores by providing these carcasses that maybe the coyotes wouldn't have been able to kill an elk, but they can still eat the elk. So I think a lot of times it can be a positive relationship. They will kick them off. Like if a cougar comes back and there's coyotes on their kill, they'll kick them off and kill them. So they are, antagonistic in that way. And we actually had some kills where we walked up and there was like a deer cached and a dead coyote. So the coyote came in and the cougar was like, no thanks, that's mine. They'll eat them too, but not that often. So I think if you can get away with it, you can sneak in and steal food and not get killed, then it'd be net positive.
Sure. Okay, cool. Chasing_spores wants to know, where do mountain lions sleep? After you dart them apparently in trails and trees
or just in general. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. He thinks he's just darting in general. That was my addition.
Yeah. So they don't den in the way that you think of, like they return to their den at night. They only have a den when they have kittens, and they only use that den for a few weeks. They'll move their kittens every 3 or 4 weeks to kind of cut down on like the scent, because the kittens are like just pooping everywhere. And so to keep the kittens safe, they keep moving them. But once the kittens are bigger and following them around, they don't use a den. Like males don't use a den. They might return to the same kind of places, but they'll just look for cover.
Cliffy area
or like thick vegetation, especially if it's like hot, like a nice thick vegetated area where it's cool and they can just sleep during the day because they're mostly going to be hunting at night. And they'll, they move around so much. Within their home range, they're covering ground. They're not returning to the same spot every night, like some might think.
Okay. At Benjamin Horsch wants to know, breeding season, if any, ? How many deer elk kills per month in the summer compared to the winter?
Cool. Okay. So breeding season.
Those are two really good questions.
So they're not seasonal breeders. They can breed year round. The females are induced ovulators, and so they can like breed and get pregnant anytime. Mostly they end up breeding in like spring, in what I've seen with my cats, the cats in my study. Mm-hmm. Most of our litters were born between July and September, and they have a 90-day gestation. Mm-hmm. So they are breeding in the spring, having kittens in early fall or late summer. I don't know how much variability there is in different ecosystems. My thought was that you want to have your kittens on the ground at their most vulnerable stage when there's a lot of food around.
Environment.
Right. And it's not too cold yet. You have a lot of like animals that are really easy to kill at that point. Cause like we said, it's the rut.
Yeah. Fawns
so you've got bigger fawns and you've also got bucks and bulls that are like super depleted.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of food around. Mom doesn't have to work that hard to eat because she needs to eat a bunch when she's lactating.
Yeah.
And she can get those kittens weaned before the winter.
I was like, I was somewhere else in my head. I was thinking like how a lot of, when you said the rut, deer breeding in the fall, so they throw the fawns in the spring.
In the spring, right. Yeah. So these guys are kind of reverse of that.
Opposite. All right. Let me see here.
Do you want to talk about the deer, elk?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, as far as the predation stuff goes, I actually don't have the top of my head have a number of like deer and elk per month. I did a lot of work on looking at how long between kills they spend and how long they spend on a kill. And so a deer, they would eat for 3 or 4 days before they move to the next thing. But people try to scale that up and say, oh, if that means they're eating a deer every 3 days and that's 10 deer a month. And like, kind of quasi. It also really depends on if they've got kittens, how big the deer elk was. Like an elk is going to go farther than a deer. What else they're eating? Because they're eating beaver and porcupine and grouse and turkeys and rabbits. Like there's a lot of small food that's kind of keeping them going between big kills. They're not just eating big kills.
Sure.
So there's a little bit of a danger in saying they eat this many animals per month because they could eat one elk maybe every 3 weeks and be fine because they can go a long time without feeding and they can feed on an elk for like 10 days. Yeah.
In general, what would you say? Do you think that it is more, are they killing more critters in the summer or the winter?
More.
I think that's like the heart of the question.
Yeah, more numbers definitely in the summer because they're killing a lot more fawns in the summer. In the winter, they are killing, things don't spoil as fast, like the meat doesn't spoil. So if you kill an elk in like the heat of the summer and you can't get it to shade, that thing's going to go rancid pretty quick. And they're not about that. Like they'll leave that for the bears. Yeah. So kill rates are higher in the summer than in the winter, and they spend less time at kills in the summer versus the winter.
Gotcha. You know what? We're going to put another up from Benjamin Horsch. Ben, you're asking some great questions, dude.
Go Ben.
Yeah, go Ben. Home radius and how territorial are they with that radius?
Really should have looked at my notes before this. I
kind of sprung it on you. You came down when Hayden agreed to do the podcast.
Yeah, so Hayden, who's also in this room, and I are working on a paper right now about cougar home ranges and space use. Plug for scientific research. But they are pretty territorial. The males are more territorial. So they will exclude each other from the same areas. So if there's a dominant tom who is kind of controlling an area, he'll push out subadults. Once those, like if a male kitten starts getting, 15, 18 months, he's going to kick him out. And so the tom will tolerate females in his range, but not males. So that kind of, it's like parsing out the landscape. Like they have neighborhoods that they control, and they could have females and kittens in those neighborhoods, but they're not going to tolerate other adult toms. Sure. The females are much more overlapping than people think. We had a lot of adult females that were related, and they would overlap in their home ranges, and they would feed on the same kills, and they don't really push each other away because they're not competing for mates, right? Like they're probably going to both breed the same male. And so they have a lot more overlap. Home range size varies a lot. If they have a really, like in the Book Cliffs, in one of my study areas, it was really high elevation desert, lower prey density and spread out less water. Their home ranges were way bigger. Yeah. But if they're in an area that's like super dense with deer and elk, their home range only needs to be as big as it takes for them to get the food they need.
Yeah, it's a resource thing.
Right. You're not going to spend all this time exploring and defending a home range that's bigger than you need to survive because you've got to be efficient.
Right. Okay. So can you give me an example of a very large home range and a very like compact home range?
We could have Hayden look it up.
Are we talking about in the context of like miles?
I could not say.
Okay, hey, Benjamin, great question.
I can look that up.
We'll have something somewhere. Maybe it's over your shoulder right now.
Maybe it's over my shoulder now.
Could be.
Get some I feel like I think in kilometers squared, so I can't tell you in miles.
Okay, Everest Mystery, that's my buddy Tom Pollard. He says, is it unethical, and I think I already know your answer to this, is it unethical, in parentheses, or lame, to hunt them with packs of dogs that tree them?
No, that's not unethical or lame. That's super cool because, like we said, you can be selective. You can choose to not shoot the animal. And the dogs are not making, like we touch on this, the dogs are not making contact with the cougar. It's not like they're going to hurt it. Honestly, if your dogs are making contact with the cougar, the dog's going to be the one who are hurting. Mm-hmm. So like you do not want that to happen. But no, I think it's it takes skill to know how to find them. You have to work and train your dogs and have a good team that knows how to do everything. And it allows you to get out there and be in their environment with them. I think it's cool.
Yeah. Next question comes from Kubi Brown. He says, I heard that mountain lions make excellent pets. Is that true?
I'm going to go with no. I'm going to go with maybe up to 6 months. And then no. Then they're too big. You got to rehouse them. Don't actually do this. Do not. Do not have a mountain lion as a pet. They are extremely cute though. So I understand.
This one comes from my buddy, Bobby. He said his handle is Sock Revival. He's actually a really incredible musician. We're going to put a link to his music in the description. He says, chances are that you actually see one in NEPA, which is an acronym for Northeastern Pennsylvania. I heard a lot of tales growing up.
I think they could be there. They're not, from what I know, there's not like a breeding population, but they're expanding like and pushing into the Midwest for sure. And like we had some end up in New York, right? Or like at least one. I don't know that there's been documentation of cougars in Pennsylvania. We did just see, was it Michigan? We just, a couple months ago, there was a big news report where the first documented kittens in Michigan were found, where they were seen. Really? And like a civilian just was like driving down the road and there were kittens running across the road. And so that was a really big deal because documented reproduction shows more establishment than just like a dispersing male. But you could I wouldn't be surprised if there was a cougar in Pennsylvania right now. I don't think they're common, but
they're transient. It's not like there's an established population.
No. If they're not finding mates, like they're not really going to hang out.
Right.
They're just going to keep moving.
It's possible one gets a wild hair and just like goes, but it's not like, oh yeah, they're
obviously established. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. This sounds like a dumb one. I think this person's trying to be funny, but you have had a lot of up close experiences with living lions. John WNO.H wants to know, do they respond to
Yeah.
Really?
Totally. If you like, we would just like talk at them in the tree, make noises at them to get them to like turn a certain way. So if you're trying to get like a shot at like a shoulder so you can dart them, we'd totally have someone go and like call them from the other side to get them to turn. All cats respond to piss, piss, piss. Totally.
Okay. And we're going to take one more. This is from Sam Abney 07. He asked a question previously. Sam _Abney 07 says, if two males get in a fight and one dies, does it turn into cannibalism?
No, they don't usually eat each other.
Why is that, you think? It's just mountain lion code?
Yeah. It's like the pirate code. No, yeah, they don't usually eat other cougars. I guess they could if they were really hungry, but most of the time they're fighting over territory. They're not fighting because they're hungry. And not that I think they would pass up eating another cougar, but we've had some that were like probably involved in a fight, and I don't know. I mean, it might be documented somewhere, but I feel like that'd be weird.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect them to eat each other.
Yeah, it seems like if
they do scavenge.
Sure.
Like they'll eat food that another cougar has eaten, or they'll eat roadkill, but like I don't know that they're not fighting to eat at that point.
It's not a well-documented phenomenon.
Yeah. No, it might happen, but not that I know of.
Interesting. All right. Well, great. Hey, thank you to everybody that submitted questions. Again, if you want your question answered by an expert like Dr. Kristin over here, follow me on Instagram. I put out calls to action in my story all the time about this sort of thing. And, who knows? You could be one of the people who gets their question answered and you get to participate in the Backcountry Manifesto. That's fun, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we went to listener questions, I had kind of teed you up to tell an interesting story, I guess, from the field among the other ones, one of your favorites. So before we close here, it had to do with, you said you wanted to talk about catching kittens.
Yeah. So that was one of the really cool parts of this research because no one really had done this in Utah. So I got to go, I actually learned from a biologist in Colorado who has caught hundreds of kittens. He came and taught me what the best way is to handle these guys so we can get collars on them, get data from them, and not harm them. And we had some really crazy experiences kind of hiking into these den sites. As I said, the females only den when they have kittens and they want to put them in really rugged terrain. So most of the time, big rocks, under rocks.
Just hard places to get to.
Hard places to get to. Deadfall, lots of thorns, really annoying places, honestly. But that's how they're going to keep their kittens safe when they're little. So we're going in when they're about 5 or 6 weeks. We've got a GPS collar on mom, so that's how we know where the den is because we look at her points and we start figuring out, okay, she's coming back to this one point and then she's eating and then she's coming back. This is where the den is. So we hike in there. I probably visited 25 dens at least. And we always go in with 2 to 3 people. We've got bear spray. We've got, we usually have telemetry on. So we're listening for mom to see where she is. Most of the time she's not there because she's out hunting. And we can just kind of get in and get out. There was one time where I had 2 biologists from Utah with me, and it was their first den. So I'm all nervous. We got to make sure this goes well because, I got to impress the biologist. And this was a cat who, it was her first litter. And we scramble around. We finally find the kittens. We scoop them up, stick them in potato sacks, and we're looking for all the others. We get all the kittens we can find, and we're sitting there and we pull them out and we work them up. And you could hear some rustling and a little low kind of growl. And there was a female circling around us while we were handling the kittens. And I was focused on the kittens. I had a technician and we're working and, I wasn't really paying attention. And the biologist goes, Kristin, do you hear that? And I was like, oh yeah, that's mom. It's fine. We just started talking really loud. We said, oh, it's fine. We're going to leave soon, mom. And we just start, we're like, okay, we need to get out of here. Yeah. But we ended up finding 2 kittens that time. And we knew there were 3 because one of my techs had accidentally found the den when she was going in for a kill site when the kittens were a week old.
Gotcha.
So she saw 3. And so we ended up going, you know what? 2's good. We're good. Mom is right here and she is not pleased. So we worked those guys up, put them away and left. And yeah, sure enough, that GPS shows that she'd been circling right around us.
Really?
So it goes to show she wanted to know what we were doing. She was, aware, but she wasn't going to come in and attack. There was 5 people in there. She's not going to come out swinging for these kittens. But it was really cool to realize, knowing the behavior of the animal and kind of being aware and respecting, she needs space. We're going to come in. We're going to gently push her out to do what we need to do. And then we're going to leave. She came back, got them. They're fine. But that was probably one of the really cool experiences where it's this is pretty crazy stuff. You don't really get to do this that much.
No.
So that was pretty sweet.
No, you don't. You really don't get to do it. Well, for most of us, we don't get to do it at all. And so, I really appreciate you coming on and letting us live vicariously through your experiences. You got a minute right here to pitch whatever you want to the camera. You could tell them about, I don't know, maybe a
Bye, June.
June's not interested. You could tell them about an organization that you like, where they might find more information about mountain lions. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah. So if you want to support conservation and research, the stuff that I do, definitely call your reps and senators and tell them that you value science and research, that you value the Forest Service and state agencies that are doing the wildlife management and NGOs like Nature Conservancy, Mountain Lion Foundation, those are great things to be involved in, supporting public land access. And, you know, especially right now, I work for the Forest Service, and supporting the Forest Service research programs or access to public land is huge right now. So
great.
That's, super important. Get involved, advocate for the lands you want to explore on and hunt on, and
excellent.
Keep them wild.
Well, thanks again. And thank you guys for listening. Come back next week. We got all sorts of really cool stuff. The music's getting louder over my shoulder right now, and we're about to roll credits. Thanks again, guys. Thanks, Kristin.
Yeah, thanks.
Everybody, thanks for watching this episode of the Backcountry Manifesto podcast. If you want more Backcountry Manifesto, go ahead and check out one of these links right here. And make sure to share the podcast with your friends, comment, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. It really helps us out. Again, thank you very much for watching. Now go check out one of these things. I like this one. This one was a good episode, I promise.